Hey everyone, and welcome to Peter Tiers Stuff. Today we're tiering Quentin Tarantino movies because the chat, which I am live streaming in front of right now, wish for Tarantino. So we're doing a director's filmography today. We're going to do 9 Quentin Tarantino movies now. We have a number of ranks, S being special, and then A, B, C, D, E, F. Straightforward enough. Everyone understands these grades, right? These letter grades. And I'm going to put the movies into their proposed tiers. Now, it doesn't actually mean that I will use all of the tiers. The last one I did use every single one very healthily because I did the Marvel movies and there was a lot of them. But today we're doing Tarantino movies. I may not use all of the tiers and we'll see how this goes. So without further ado, let's begin. Now the question I always have to ask myself, do I start at the top? Do I start at the bottom? Do I work my way down or work my way up? But here's the thing. With a lot of these tiers, I'm going to have an opinion that I know that I have going in. In this case, I know what my favourite Tarantino movie is. So I can pretty much just slot that in straight away in the S tier and call that a day for me, right? This is subjective. This is my tiers. This isn't your tiers. This isn't some sort of objective tiers that I expect to be used in the history books. This is my tiers. So the S tier for me, without question, is Kill Bill, which I do count as one movie because it was made as one movie. It was released in 2 halves because it was bloody long, but it was written as one movie and shot pretty much for one movie. So, and I always watch it together. I never watch it separately, so I always consider them one movie. And even if I didn't, or even if you disagree with that, I mean, doesn't really matter. I'm putting both parts in the S rank. Tarantino is at his best for me, and I don't mean this with any pun intended, but he's at his best for me when he is doing pulp. Not necessarily Pulp Fiction, although we'll get to Pulp Fiction in a minute. But when he does like action movies, when he does adventure movies, where he's playing upon tropes of like heroes and villains, and he's doing fight scenes and violence, and he has all these wacky music choices, and Kill Bill is such a bright and colourful film. The characters are so animated, they're very memorable. Every scene feels like it's a short film on its own that pops on its own, but it makes this whole. It has all these quirky little details. There's one of the flashbacks is animated. We have this narrative structure that leads to all these little funny beats, especially in the first half. So I love Kill Bill. Kill Bill, for me, is kind of Tarantino at his most fun. And while I typically like everything he's done, I think Tarantino at his most fun is where I like him to be the most. Things are already getting tricky. And I know Tara's going to kill me for doing this before I rewatch Jackie Brown. I can tell you that right now. And maybe this will be controversial, what I'm about to do. But honestly, my second favourite Tarantino movie is actually Django Unchained, which I'm going to put in the A rank. Everything I said for Kill Bill pretty much is still true for Django Unchained. It's an adventure story of a hero who rises up and fights the horrible villains. But the villains in this are even worse than Kill Bill. Leonardo DiCaprio in this movie and the other characters around are straight up garbage human beings, and you can't wait to see them be torn down a peg or two. You can't wait to see Jamie Foxx and what's his face? Christoph Waltz. You got Christoph Waltz and his relationship with Jamie Foxx in this movie, the friendship that forms over the course of the movie is so touching, and the exit of that friendship and the way it wraps up, and the bond, and it's one of those things where it's so easy to do a buddy cop movie or something like that. But this has so much more weight than that for me. But it's also a very funny movie, despite the fact that it's got all these really heavy topics. And you find yourself rooting for the main character in a way that's just delightful. And, so much of this movie brings a smile to my face. Jamie Foxx, the first time he wears that ridiculous outfit and the camera just goes in. Really, really great stuff. And this is where things I think get tricky, because I always typically say Kill Bill is my favourite and Django Unchained is my second favourite. From there, things get a little bit more murky, depending on my mood. So it's worth mentioning that whatever I put wherever today doesn't necessarily mean that I'll feel the same way in 2 days' time. I'll tell you right now, I'm not using the F tier. I don't even think I'm using the E tier. I don't think Tarantino has any E or F grade movies. Debatably, he doesn't even have a D tier. But then maybe he does. You know what he does? He has a D tier. D is for Death Proof. And it's not that it's a bad movie. I actually think it's fairly enjoyable. His rating still has the characters kind of popping, and it has an energy to it that I really enjoy. But It's definitely his weakest film, and just how limited it is in what it's saying. He is purely just doing a grindhouse movie, and that's what the double feature was called. So I can't really fault him for that. But it's not as exciting as the rest of the films. I think it's a testament to Quentin Tarantino's skill that looking at the rest of these movies, it's becoming more difficult and difficult. And I hate to do this next one because I have to rewatch it, and there's a very good chance it's going to rise up after I do so. And someone just called it out in the chat, but Jackie Brown is going to go into the C tier. And I have to, I really do have to kind of treat this with soft gloves, because it's not that I think this is a bad movie. I mean, at Death Proof, I don't even think it's a bad movie. Jackie Brown is solid from what I remember, but I've only seen it once, and it was a long, long time ago, and it never really inspired me to watch it again. I do have people around me, though, telling me to rewatch it, and that it actually holds up surprisingly well, and it's kind of like almost a gem of Tarantino's that most people kind of like come back around on later, and I can totally see that happening. But as of right now, I have not rewatched it yet. I do plan on doing it soon, but I have not yet, and because of that, I can't really put it any higher than my gut is telling me right now at the C rank. I'm going to be clear and say that every single movie that's left is going into either the A rank or the B rank. I may have to rethink this a little bit, actually. I may have to rethink how much these grades are worth. One of my problems with these grade lists is that I think I have to get away from the idea that an A always means an A, and an S is always is equal to other S's. When I'm thinking about other rankings, when I'm thinking of what I did for the Marvel movies, I have to get away from the idea that a C in that list is the same as a C in this list. I'm tiering Tarantino only against himself, not against anyone else's tiers or rankings. And I think I need more leeway of what the top chunk is. Because I definitely need to separate these, but I don't necessarily think all of them belong in the same two tiers. So I think what I'm going to do, because I don't think Death Proof should go below a D. I genuinely don't. So I'm going to actually put Jackie Brown down a tier. And it's not because I think any less of it than what I said a minute ago. It's because I think I need this slot. Because I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is the next one up. But I didn't feel right putting Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with some of these movies in the B tier, because I don't feel like it's quite on their level, even though I like the movie a lot. It definitely has the sort of pacing and dialogue that Tarantino has, which is really good. But the one thing it has that's different from the rest of the films is that it has less of an actual plot. It's very much content with just being a sort of mood piece of this little period in Hollywood. And it does have a fantastic point that it makes at the end, and I think it all adds up to a great, idea, a great kind of almost tone poem that Tarantino wanted to give about his favorite era, about a what if situation. And I think on that level, it's actually very, very strong, and it says something this strong is what I'm going to put in the C tier. But I do think it goes in the C tier, unfortunately. So I'm going to leave Once Upon a Time in Hollywood there. I know, looking at these four, where I'm putting the rest. And I can tell you right now that Hateful Eight and Inglourious Basterds is going in the B tier. And this is excellent middle Tarantino. And I don't mean that badly, because middle Tarantino is an absurdly high standard, because Tarantino makes great movies. Hateful Eight is a great bottle movie, which is something Tarantino's done a couple of times, and I really like the way the characters bounce off each other. I like the way it reveals its story. I like how cinematic, the 65, 70mm, whatever it was, film that he was using is really epic. It looks great. It feels like a big deal. It feels like an old school movie because it's just filled out with these stars, and movies don't really do that as much anymore, and it doesn't feel as important if they do. This movie does. It feels like he's this. A lot of his cinema is this, but it really feels like he's harkening back to the rest of like his love of cinema. And in this case, it's mostly westerns, obviously, and a few other things. But Hateful Eight goes there. Inglourious Basterds is kind of almost the perfect movie for two people sitting across from a table talking to each other, and the tension just cranking and cranking the entire time. Christoph Waltz is a great villain in this. Brad Pitt is good in this, and I wouldn't have necessarily said I like Brad Pitt that much, but his appearances in Tarantino movies have been really good. Obviously, both have their humor as well, both have their memorable moments. B tier, Tarantino. Which leaves us with Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, both of which I think go in the A tier. And that's kind of where we end up. Pulp Fiction, I don't really need to say much about Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction is much loved. The internet movie watching community typically place it as his best movie and one of the highest things ever rated of all time. And while I do think he's got some better movies, because I typically like the more adventurous, heroic stuff than I do the crime element, I do obviously think it's very well made. It's full of quotable lines. The cast is insane. It's very witty. It's the sort of thing where I didn't necessarily know what to expect from it because the premise or the plot of what it's actually doing isn't necessarily my type of thing. But once I'm actually watching it, it doesn't matter because it's like sliding through warm butter. I mean, all of his movies feel like that, but that one especially feels like there's this confident film for only his second feature when he didn't exactly, rise through the ranks of film school like most directors do or anything like that. He worked in a video store. It's insanely impressive. And then Reservoir Dogs, I love bottle movies, and I think, for me, it beats out Hateful Eight just a little bit, because I love how rough around the edges it is, I love how simple it is, and how cheap it is. I love that it's just in a warehouse, and he pulls off the unraveling story that he does with just a group of great actors and a good script. And that's it. I love how simple that movie is. And I like that it is a little bit rough. I like that it's, kind of cheap looking and all these other things, because I'm always impressed when something is pulled off like that. I mean, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I'm sure cost a fortune to make. Maybe not as much as your, $300 million Marvel movie. And Reservoir Dogs is an example of a movie going in and just doing it cheap. Like, I almost wish he just made cheap movies at this point. Just to go and do some cheap movies. My ranking are as follows. And one of the things we did last time as well is that in each tier I ordered the movies left to right from best to worst. This may be controversial, but I actually would put Reservoir Dogs slightly ahead of Pulp Fiction, given my tastes. I'd put Hateful Eight slightly ahead of Inglourious Basterds. I'd put Jackie Brown ahead of Death Proof, so that's all right. And like I say, Kill Bill I'm including as one movie, so there's nothing to read into there but the order. It's just 1 and 2. There we go. That's my tiers. S tier is Kill Bill for me. A tier is Django Unchained, Reservoir Dogs, and Pulp Fiction. B is The Hateful Eight and Inglourious Basterds. C is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and D is Jackie Brown and Death Proof. With the caveat that Jackie Brown I really need to rewatch. What's exciting to me about this is that some directors get worse as they go. But if you look at this isn't like all the old movies or all of his early movies are up top and then all of these new movies are down the bottom. It's very mixed. Kill Bill's right in the middle of his career at this point, which is actually quite funny because when I started watching Tarantino movies, I think that was the newest one. So that felt like a new Tarantino versus the other ones, which were the older Tarantino movies, but that's like the middle now. But then you have Django, which is even newer than that, but then you got Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, which are his first two movies. And then you got Hateful Eight, which is his second to last, and Inglourious Basterds, which was before that. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was his newest movie, and then Jackie Brown was his third movie, and Death Proof was just after Kill Bill, so just after the middle. So I guess what I'm saying is that he's like, it's not like all the movies I like are the start of his career. It veers back and forth, and it says to me that he's not getting worse as he gets older. Unlike other directors who have felt that way to me, and like all their good stuff is in the first decade or two of their career, and then the later stuff is mind-numbingly bad, and you feel like you can't be excited for them anymore. I'm still excited for Tarantino. I'm still excited for his TV show, for his 10th and hopefully not final movie. There we go, Tarantino ranked. Hopefully you had fun with this one. Let me know what you thought of my rankings, what your favourite Tarantino movies are in the comments below. Feel free to give me some suggestions for other things you'd like me to tier. So get me on mailed_fuzz on Twitter. If you want to get updates for the channel and all that in there. If you want to support the channel and everything we do, head over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv. You can support us for as little as $1 per month and get all the content, or keep all the content coming. Thank you very much for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies and all that jazz. And I don't really have a proper outro here, so I will simply say, once upon a time, a $5 shake might have felt expensive. These days, I would kill for a good $5 shake. Bye, guys.